You're listening to XVGM Radio. Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Mike.
And I'm Justin.
And this is episode 116. Spookyfest.
Spookyfest
2024.
That's correct. It is that time of year again. We are here outside in the freezing cold rain, weathering it all for you and for them.
That's
Who are
right.
they? Don't ask. They're always watching.
Yes, always. Today we are playing spooky tracks like we always do this time of year. What is this, 6 years running? 7 years?
No. Really?
Six. Yes, 6 years running.
Holy moly.
Good times. So we have picked a ghastly gaggle of tracks for you. Starting with our intro that we brought you in with. We always try to pick something new and different, and this year I went with Spirits and Spells. This also is called Castleween in Europe. It came out on the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance in 2003. I believe it also came out in the PAL
PS2,
territories
I thought.
on PS2,
Yeah.
I think. I'm not 100% sure on if the PS2 version came out in North America. I think the PS2 version just came out in Europe. I've never seen it personally for the North American version.
Yeah, I've never heard of this one.
Yeah,
but
and it came out in Japan as well the following year.
Yeah, should probably be clear. It may have come out in the GBA, but I'm pretty sure this was not even related to the GBA music.
Yes,
so.
yeah, though this did not play on the GBA. If it did, it's a totally different version.
Right.
Yeah, it did get a GBA port as well. I've never played that, but I've never played this game, so
right.
It's always one of those games that I saw on the shelf and I was like, I don't know. You're playing as two kids.
Oh yeah, and you famously hate playing as children.
I don't mind it as much if it's a platform game. It's when it's like an RPG,
that's right, yes.
Or a fighting game, really. So the track was called The Shrouded Cemetery and the Crypt, and it was by Michel, Golgivit, and Olivier, Rabat. Yeah. So this game is pretty neat, but we'll talk about that in a minute. What did you think of this track?
It was cute. It reminded me of some early Danny Elfman.
Okay.
It definitely had those Danny Elfman, Tim Burton vibes to it. Yeah, I was actually kind of thinking of Beetlejuice over Nightmare Before Christmas or Batman or anything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, without having the context of the game, which is weird because frequently I don't have the context of the game, and I have plenty of feelings about a song, but I just enjoyed the kind of Danny Elfman-esque spooky vibes for it, and I assume that it is all appropriate for what's going on. It is a Halloween-ish game, so yeah, Halloween-ish music.
Yeah. I think it's Halloween based in terms of the characters. You're playing as two different kids, Alicia and Greg. They go to a spooky house with some of their pals, but there's a character named the Boogeyman who ends up stealing the souls of their buddies, and they get turned to stone as well. So that's like a double whammy. Whammy, yeah. So they end up having to rescue their friends' souls and also turn them into human, non-stone people again. And the way that they do that is they have to go to a place called the Land of Dead. And they have to take on a mad scientist So yeah, that's pretty much the game. But there's a bunch of different places that they can go to. They can go to a haunted house. They can go to a cemetery. They can go to the mad scientist lab, that sort of thing. But what's cool is each character has like different advantages and things that can be considered disadvantages. Alicia, she's dressed up as a witch. She is strong against ice, where she can't be hurt by it, but she can also shrink herself down. Whereas Greg has fire powers, and he has a super jump.
Ooh.
Yeah.
He's like Mario then.
Yeah, a little bit. And there's also very Mario-esque action in this, because you could like jump on the heads of bad guys and stuff like that.
Okay.
It is a 3D game. It's linear though, but it is a 3D like action platformer type game. So
okay.
Yeah, I haven't played it. It got kind of mixed reviews when it came out. So the box art on the PS2 European version is atrocious. It's really bad, but it's a little better on the GameCube version that came out here in the States. So
nice.
Yeah. So I don't know. I knew and heard of this game, and I wanted to pick something that was a little different. And this is more something that I think you would pick normally, because you tend to go for the more like family-friendly Halloween type games, stuff like Banjo-Kazooie and stuff like, I noticed you pick a lot of stuff like that.
What did I do a while ago? Costume Quest?
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this definitely gives me vibes of Costume Quest.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the kids and the powers, it sounded
with the kids and the costumes and the
yeah. It sounded similar. It was funny because when you called it Castleween, I was just like, is this a Homestar Runner related game? Like,
yeah,
Decemberween.
Yeah, Castleween. It does sound a bit like that.
Yeah.
The composers on this one, Michel Golgivit, has a pretty decent list of credits, starting off with the DOS game that came out in 1991 called Prehistoric. They worked on games like Urban Runner, Legend in 1998, which came out on the PlayStation, Soul Fighter, which was a Dreamcast exclusive, and after Spirits and Spells, they worked on doing some recordings for Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones. They worked with Far Cry Instincts, and their most recent release was the game Nightmare Busters, which came out in 2013.
Okay.
So yeah,
I feel like I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a Super Nintendo game that came out. It's like an aftermarket kind of game. I think it was supposed to come out like way back in the day, but it didn't. I think
during the SNES run.
Yeah, I think so. And it just never came out, and so they like actually did it, if I recall. I could be wrong about that, but I'm almost positive that was the case.
That's the case. That's pretty neat. I feel like I'd almost love to see other, I mean, granted, it depends on who owns the title and who owns the rights to the game, but like I'd love to see other things that weren't completed or weren't released, have the people that were making them just pick them up and be like, you know what, let's just finish this and get it out.
The other composer, Olivier Rabat, has similar long lists of credits. It looks like both of them ended up working at Ubisoft, because they started off doing similar games: Legend, Soul Fighter, Urban Runner, Prince of Persia: Two Thrones, Far Cry Instincts, Naruto: Rise of a Ninja, Topspin 3, Age of Conan: Rise of the Godslayer. So, and they also worked on Nightmare Busters as well. Their latest game is No Straight Roads, which came out in 2020 on the Xbox One. They're labeled as office management for that, but it looks like a lot of their music credits moved over to like production credits for a lot of their games after 2015. So it looks like maybe around, they were doing like audio project manager type stuff. So I do have to wonder how much of their actual music got into this game. Maybe they're just the sound guy, so to speak, and not the, composer, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, we want to get into your first real pick and start this shebang off?
Yeah, let's do it. The spooky shebang.
Spooky shebang.
The spooky shebang. Let's do Clock Tower on the Super NES. This one, I mean...
We've talked about Clock Tower before.
I think we have, but believe it or not, we've never played a Clock Tower track.
Wait, really?
Yeah. I thought we did, but we apparently didn't.
Huh.
Yeah. This came out in 1995. This track is called Death in the Elevator, and it's by Koji Nikura. All right, thanks for joining us back on our Spookyfest episode for 2024. That was Clock Tower, and the track that we heard was Death in the Elevator, and it's the Super Nintendo version of the game that came out in 1995. Actually, I'm sorry, the Super Famicom version of the game.
This didn't come out over here.
We'll get to that in a minute.
All right.
By Koji Nikura. I do love this track. I really love the panning effects going back and forth.
On those drums?
Yeah, the drums, the prr, back and forth. But this is a cool track that I enjoy the whole soundtrack on this game. It's really atmospheric, and I really dig those drums. I also really like the use of what sounds like a scream. The wow, 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 wow. You know, like the it also kind of pans a little bit. It's cool. This definitely gets your heart racing, and I love those like almost tubular bells, kind of those really creepy keys. Really awesome. This game is pretty cool. Have you? Well, first let me get your thoughts on the track, and then let me ask you if you played the game.
Yeah. So the opening of the track was actually kind of a little weird. It sounded to me like you were hearing this music, but it was coming from another room and there was a door closed.
Okay.
Like it sounded like you were listening to music that was just being played in another room. And then as it kind of got more and more into the song, I lost that sense a bit because there were some sounds felt like they were here with me while the majority of the song was in another room. And then it just kind of blended. But like what you're talking about with the stereo effect with the rolling drums kind of felt to me like almost like you're being chased, and like there's something like that rolling drum sound just reminds me of like, I don't want to say like a horror monster sound, because there are plenty, like, you know, Jason's got the and like all the horror monsters generally have like a sound that's associated with them when they're chasing you, and this just, because it's bouncing from left to right, it feels like, you know, you're trying to escape this thing, and it's like it's over here, it's behind you on the left, and it's behind you on the right, and it adds to like the tension, which I thought was really cool.
So this game got released originally on the Super Famicom, and it never made it to North America in terms of getting a proper re-release on the Super NES. But it did get a remake that came out on the PlayStation 1.
Yes. So that's what I was going to say. I feel like we've talked about Clock Tower in the sense of not this specific game, but in the Clock Tower series, and
we played a track from the third game.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
This game takes a lot of influence from horror movies, notably the Dario Argentino movie that came out called Phenomena back in 1985, which stars a young Jennifer Connelly. And it's pretty obvious that the director of this game, Hifumi Kono, wanted to reference that because he literally made the main character in his game, whose name is also Jennifer. Her name is Jennifer Simpson, but they made her look exactly like Jennifer Connelly in the game. But this game, you're in a house and you are running from, it's a point and click game. It's all 2D, but you're running from a character named Scissorman. He's like a evil stalker. He's kind of like a short little guy who has these, I don't know if he's like a child, I can't remember, but he's got these giant scissors. And so you're trying to just avoid him in you know, the typical slasher movie style plot. Phenomena in and of itself, totally different type of movie than what they did with Clock Tower. Very, very, very bizarre movie. But so that's Clock Tower in a nutshell. The game is getting a re-release on modern consoles with a revisited or remade version. They re-updated all the sprites. It's got work that was done by, I think her name's Miriam. She's a Way Forward artist.
Okay.
She's done stuff on like Shovel Knight, and you know, I follow her on Twitter, and she does some really good stuff. I think she did most of the redesigned sprites and everything. So should be cool. I'm not sure if they're updating the music as well, if they're keeping the music the same. They'll probably have at least like a classic mode where you can hear the original music in the game, I'm assuming. But yeah, that's getting a re-release most recently on actually very soon, October 29th, 2024, which is right around when this airs. So, yeah. So save your pennies and go pick up. It's coming out on the Switch. It's called Rewind. So it's called Clock Tower Rewind. So it's coming out on the Switch, the PlayStation 4, and the PlayStation 5. There's going to be also a Windows, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X/S port.
Nifty.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like this may lead into our first sponsor.
Yes, it does. For Scissorman's Ginsu Scissors. Have you ever wanted to cut through meat with the stroke of your pinky? Well, Scissorman's Ginsu Scissors is just the slice and dice device you need. You can cut through anything, or your money back. It's that easy. Just stop by your local Sharper Image and grab one for the low cost of $85.99.
Nice.
Yeah. So before we wrap up with Clock Tower, I'll just touch real quick on the composer Koji Nakura. They started off with a game called SOS, which came out in the Super NES in 1993. And they worked on Popful Mail's TurboGrafx CD port in 1994. Jumped around to a bunch of other Human Entertainment games, because that game was Human Entertainment. Worked on Shadow of the Colossus, doing sound design on that. Loco Roco for the PSP, they were lead sound designer, and they kind of jumped around to a bunch of different Sony games, specifically God of War Ragnarok. They were a sound designer on that, and their latest game, Rise of the Ronin, which came out in 2024 for the PS5, they were credited as sound designer. So again, a composer moving into his sound design job. Yeah, pretty common.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, all right, what do you got for us for your first pick?
All right, so my first up is going to be from a game called Splatterhouse 3. This was a 1993 release on the Sega Genesis. The track is called David in Peril, and it was composed by Aiko Kaneda, credited as Milky Aiko. All right, you're back, and that was David in Peril from Splatterhouse 3, the Genesis game that came out in 1993 and was composed by Aiko Kaneda.
Yeah, definitely had some Baroque elements there with that that harpsichord.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
Just feeling that.
Very, very sharp. If I had known about the soundtrack when we did so I don't know if this is a Gems driver game, but this is a game that I thought utilized the FM chip pretty well. Like it's a little bit sharp, but it's meant to be because that's kind of how a harpsichord sounds.
Yeah.
And I really just kind of enjoyed the, like you said, Baroque feel and composition of this one, because like the game is not like, it's not a Castlevania. It is not a game that takes place in like the way back, Baroque times. This is a game that takes place in like the modern-ish 90s era. So it's one of those, it's got that feel, but it's more that feel to make it feel unreal or to be creepy than anything else.
I dug the track, of course, because I'm a sucker for anything Baroque, but I will say that I don't know much about this game in particular for Splatterhouse 3. I've played the first Splatterhouse. I almost said Spiderhouse. But I have not played the third one, so I don't know much about it. But I know that you play as Rick.
Yes.
In all of the games.
Yes. Yeah. So it is a direct sequel to Splatterhouse 2. It takes place, I think, 5 years or so. Yeah, about 5 years after Splatterhouse 2. Okay. Rick and his wife Jennifer, Rick and Jennifer got married. Yeah. Had a son named David, hence the title of the track.
David and
Peril. But overall, it seems to be very in line with the other games. It's a beat 'em up. Jennifer gets kidnapped, and you have to put on the terror mask to defeat these monsters and whatnot. And then you finally rescue, you attempt to rescue Jennifer. There are multiple endings depending on what happened. Different things can happen. So you go to rescue Jennifer, and you can either save her and be successful in saving her, or you could fail and she could turn into a mindless beast. But once you get through that, you find out that was all a distraction, because the evil one, the main bad guy in the game, actually kidnapped David at that point, because David has some latent psychic abilities, and the evil one wants to use that to unlock something called the Dark Stone. And then so at the end, you try to save David, and you can also succeed or fail at saving David. Okay. So there are 4 endings. There's the bad ending where you get through everything, but both David and Jennifer are dead. There's the ending where Jennifer dies or turns into a mindless beast, but David survives. There's an ending where David dies and Jennifer is saved. And then there's the good ending where everybody lives happily ever after.
Sure. Obviously, you want to go for that one.
Right. And that apparently is the hardest one to do.
Apparently, I'm reading that Rick has become a successful businessman on Wall Street.
Yeah.
And he bought a mansion in Connecticut. So the whole thing takes place
in our own backyard.
Yeah.
Yes. Makes sense. I've lived here long enough and seen some of these monsters.
That all checks out, which means he probably lives in Greenwich.
Oh, I was going to say he lives in Cheshire.
No, he probably lives in Greenwich. Because
the mansions.
If you're traveling to Wall Street, you live in Greenwich or Stamford, and you take the train in, to Wall Street. So most likely that's what's going on.
That's a fair point.
Little insider knowledge for you. Yeah,
forgot about that. All those Wall Street bankers in Greenwich.
That's it. So this actually was pretty crazy, because it was one of the first games that was given like an MA13 rating back in the day. I mean, I think it was, I think it was like one of the first games. Yeah,
93. I mean, all that came about because of, I think, Mortal Kombat, if I remember. So it was somewhere around that time. 93 feels about right, like the early 90s.
Yeah, the rating system came out in April 94.
Oh.
So GA, MA13, MA17, those were all the ratings prior to E and...
so this was rated on a self-rating system, not the ESRB.
I believe so, yeah, because it came out in, 93?
Yes.
And the rating system came out in 94. So I think what they were doing is they were coming out with rating systems just on their own.
Yeah, they were trying to self-regulate, and then the Angry Mothers of America decided that they'd had enough.
Yeah, because they're
violence.
Not ESRB ratings.
Right.
Because there's no MA. I don't think there's an MA17 or MA13 or GA.
No.
Not for modern games.
It's E for everyone.
Yeah.
I think there's
T
a G
for teen.
Is there not G for?
No, there's no
because
G.
E is G.
It's E for everyone, and then
for teen.
and then T for teen, and then MA
for mature.
Mature, and that's it.
I think that's
and
it.
There's also like adult.
I was gonna say there's AO, adults only.
AO,
I think that was added later.
Yeah, and I mean those games don't come out on like consoles anyways, so pretty wild, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, it was pretty well reviewed at the time, too. So, I mean, if you like the other Splatterhouse games, this is probably right up your alley. And again, continuing the story. And I mean, if you get the good ending, it looks like the good ending potentially ends the line of thing. I don't. Is there a Splatterhouse 4?
There is a remake of Splatterhouse that basically retells the story of the first game, but it's all done in 3D, and that came out on like the 360 and the PS3.
Right.
That one's a pretty good game, actually. And what's cool about that one is it's got all the original Splatterhouse games in it as unlockable content. So,
neat.
Yeah, that's a cool game. Definitely underrated. We may or may not have played a track off of it. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't think we've played any of the Splatterhouse soundtracks.
Oh, maybe not.
Yeah. So Aiko Kaneda, as I said, was credited as Milky Aiko in this game. Started out in 1991 doing Power League 4. They did sound and effects on TurboGrafx 16. And in fact, most of their credits here look to be sound. Dig Dug in 1992 on the Game Boy, composer on this game, composer on Splatterhouse 2, composer and sound design on this game in 1993, and their last game looked to be Miracle Girls Tomomi to Mikage no Miracle World Adventure on the SNES in 1993. So yeah, they were really just active in the early 90s, and that's all we got.
Okay.
All right, where are we going?
All right.
Where are you taking us?
All right, next we're moving on to a Sega Genesis game. This did get a release in multiple different consoles, the Sega CD, the Super NES, etc., etc. But Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure came out on the Sega Genesis in 1994. This track in particular is exclusive, I believe, to the Genesis version. It's called Lacumel Rainforest, and it's composed by Matt Furness and with drivers by Sean Hollingworth. Hey, thanks for joining us back on our Spookyfest 2024 episode. That was Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure, and that came out on the Sega Genesis, amongst many other systems, but this was specific to that port. Came out in 1994, and that track was Lackamal Rainforest, and it came out by Matt Furness, legendary composer, and Sean Hollingworth did the drivers. No surprise how amazing this sounds. Really love the panning effects back and forth on this. It's got a real creepy vibe to it with very minimalist sound.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there's not a ton going on here, and that's not a complaint.
Oh, sure.
It's just surprising because I hear Matt Furness and I don't expect this. And again, this is not a complaint. I'm not knocking it. It's just like that's not what I expected to hear.
Right.
I really thought that creepy bell that they used in the beginning was really nice. I don't quite get Mayan, or like I don't get how the bell fits into the situation. Like maybe there's some bell in the game and like it's related to some game mechanic or whatnot.
Yeah.
But it was creepy. It threw me because I was like, how does that relate?
Yeah.
And then you've got like the stereo stuff. I wrote down stereo swishy sound because I don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
But it reminds me. It feels very Chrono Trigger-esque. Like
that.
Yeah.
And
if not Chrono Trigger, definitely there's a similar sound in Secret of Evermore. Both of those are SNES games,
Sure.
so like we're now comparing the SNES to the Genesis, which is another wild thing.
Right. Yeah, I will say this feels like a tossed track from his port of Mortal Kombat, because he did the conversions of Mortal Kombat music. Honestly, a lot of the songs just sounded very brand new, like he did, like Matt Furness composed brand new tracks for that. But yeah, this feels very much at home with some of the stuff that he was putting out on Mortal Kombat for the Genesis. So yeah, I could see that. Yeah. So Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure, this is not your granddaddy's Pitfall game.
Oh, this isn't, the blocky guy jumping over pits and alligators.
They really like remodeled this game to feel like a brand new adventure. It wasn't that, Jumpman Jumps or whatever his name was, Pitfall Harry from the old games, but you're playing as Pitfall Harry Jr. searching for his dad, trying to find him. So you're going through the Mayan jungles, all different places, and you can do like bungee jumping, which is cool. And there's a total of 13 levels, and it's a pretty good game. I have it on Sega CD, and I thought that the soundtrack was the same, but I'm going to have to go back because I looked it up, and it's not composed by the same people.
Oh.
So I'm going to have to go grab this Genesis version because from what I understand, the Sega Genesis version soundtrack is exclusive to that game. So yeah, it must be a totally different soundtrack on the Sega CD, but... yeah, pretty neat. So, but yeah, this game was published by Activision and developed by Activision, which back when they made like really, really good games. Back in the day. So pretty neat, pretty cool. I don't really have much more to say about the game because I just haven't played it. But we'll talk about Matt Furness. We have talked about Matt Furness before, plenty of times. We played him on this show. So I'm just going to pick 5 random games that he worked on. Badlands for the Atari ST, Commodore 64, and Amiga. Clax on the Amiga, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, MSX, and Amstrad CPC. And let's go something a little newer. He worked on RoboCop 3 for the Master System, Genesis, and Game Gear.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just picked 3 early ones, but his latest game, just to wrap up, was Zool Redimensioned in 2021, where he's credited for the music. He also did Fear Effect. He's known for doing the Fear Effect games. He came back and did some music for Fear Effect Sedna, which was a newer game of that. Sean Hollingworth. We really haven't talked much about Sean Hollingworth other than basically crediting him as the reason these Genesis games sound so good.
I was going to say, I remember the names. Like, I remember talking about him in some way.
Yeah. He has pretty much been working only with, for the most part, with Matt Furness, almost always. But his first game was Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe on the Genesis. He did the music code for that. Predator 2 on the Genesis. He worked on Pugsy on the Genesis and Sega CD. Mickey Mania Again, Super Nintendo, Genesis, and Sega CD did the music driver. He's pretty much always almost credited for just sound drivers or music. But his last game was the Sega Master System port of Battletoads and Battle Maniacs, which came out in 1996.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That's about it. So let's move into your next pick. What do you got for us?
All right. So next up, we have a track from Evil Dead Regeneration. This came out on the PS2, the Xbox, and the PC in 2005. Swamp Tension is the name of the track. And the composers on this, we have our PCB Productions, Christopher Larson, Keith Arem, and Michael Cohen. We'll get to that in a minute. You are back from that incredibly unsettling track called Swamp Tension. That was from Evil Dead Regeneration, the 2005 game that came out on the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, and PCs everywhere. Composers on this, so there's a little bit of confusion based on the sources that we found. So I saw original music composition by PCB Productions and Christopher Larson. I also saw separately listed elsewhere Keith Arem and Michael Cohen as composers. So we'll talk about all of them in just a little bit.
Yeah.
But first, this one, I tend not to go for the purely atmospheric things because there's not a lot happening in them. Mm-hmm. But this one, I just couldn't pass up.
Yeah.
Like you had that pulsing bass just kind of adds to this unsettling feeling that you've got. You got the water sounds that really kind of drive home that swamp feel, and then there's this buzzing, which I've heard this multiple times, and I still cannot tell if that buzzing is supposed to be like an electronic buzzing or an insect buzzing.
I think it's supposed to be an insect buzzing.
I think that might be the idea behind it, but the point that I was going to make is like, because I can't tell what it's supposed to be, it adds to me another level of unsettling. Like, it's just this thing that you can't really identify.
Much swamp. Very tension.
Very tension, yes.
Yeah, as you put during the break. Yeah, unsettling's definitely the word for this one. This is really cool. I gotta say, I think the thing that creeped me out the most was that humming bass in the background, that whirring. Yeah. Oh my God, that was so unsettling. Yeah, pulsating. Really cool. And other than that, I mean, I think the thing that really adds to the horror element for this is the idea of dying, being surrounded by all those insects, by all those the alligators. I got like a alligator crocodile kind of vibe in the beginning of the track.
Oh yeah,
you know. So that like the idea of being dead in a swamp or dying in a swamp with that being this being the last thing you hear, you know, really, really fantastic job with tension building in this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you and I are both fans of the Evil Dead series. Mm-hmm. Have you played any of the Evil Dead games?
I have not. I don't think I've played any of them.
Yeah, there's a handful.
Yeah.
None of them are what I would call remarkable. I have the one for the PlayStation 1, and that one is very much along the lines of like a Resident Evil type of survival horror game.
Yeah.
With like the fixed cameras and everything. It's very hard to play.
Yeah.
This one, I have not played myself, but I had a friend who was also really big into Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, and he had this game, and I've watched him play it a handful of times, or I've watched some, like I haven't watched him play through the entire thing a handful of times. I've watched him play
certain levels a handful of times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting game because like Evil Dead 2, it's an interesting mix of both horror and comedy. I don't think it really goes into the Army of Darkness level of like comedy over horror.
Right.
And it's not quite as like Evil Dead 1 where it's really campy and like tries to take itself very seriously. They know their audience and they know the material well enough. And what's interesting is Ash Williams is voiced by Bruce Campbell.
Nice.
Sam Raimi had a hand in this. His brother Ted had a hand in it.
Nice.
In fact, so
Shockser.
Yeah. So the overall plot, I'm not going to get too deep into this because there's a lot to this game, but the overall plot is it takes place after Evil Dead 2.
Okay.
Either don't consider Army of Darkness or consider one of the endings where he ends up coming back and he ends up in the right timeline. Ash Williams is locked away in an asylum for the criminally insane because of all the stuff that took place in Evil Dead. It says Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, but it's hard to
Evil Dead 2 is a remake of Evil Dead 1.
That's what I was going to say. Like it's hard to make that argument because those two movies, while not being exactly the same, are technically the same movie.
Yeah.
So, but he's convinced that the world thinks he's crazy, but what's actually going on, his doctor, who's Dr. Reinhardt, is somehow in possession of Necronomicon Ex Mortis, and he wants to use the book to bring about his ascension to power. So, as you do with the Necronomicon, releases an army of undead, releases the Deadites.
Just another Tuesday in Evil Dead land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, it's Ash's job to stop him and put the Deadites back where they belong. At some point along the way, way, relatively early on in the game, you meet a person, the little person named Sam, and he is half dead.
How can you be half dead?
He got better? I don't know.
Well, I got better.
Yeah, if you look at the cover art for the game, Sam is right there, and like half his face is like torn away, and you can see the flesh underneath it.
I've seen that box art, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he can return from death. Is like the thing that's cool about him. So because of his like half deadite status, he has like magical abilities, and he can't truly die. So it's pretty interesting. It's a hack and slash. You know, you've got your boomstick, you've got your chainsaw arm, and whatever other prosthetics Ash may or may have not have made. Because I'm just realizing now he made that prosthetic hand in Army of Darkness, not in the Evil Dead games or the Evil Dead movies. So
oh really? No, he made it in Evil Dead 2, didn't he?
No, he made the chainsaw.
The chainsaw hand,
not
right?
The prosthetic,
not
hand.
the prosthetic hand. That's right.
Because he in Army of Darkness he grabs that goblet and then crushes it. Yeah, it says groovy. It's an interesting game, and I would say if anybody is a fan of the Evil Dead series of movies and the TV show, give this a look, because it's not like a fantastic game that's going to blow your mind. It's a pretty fun game in the world of Army of Darkness, and it gives you more time with Bruce Campbell blowing stuff up.
Right. Yeah, I think the selling point is certainly having Bruce Campbell come back as Ash. So.
Yeah. So I haven't seen the new Evil Dead movies. I have no interest in them because I feel like they just go straight on into the horror, and I'm like, that's not what I liked about the original ones.
Yeah.
And I don't think they had Sam Raimi's involvement.
No.
They might have gotten his blessing or whatever, but it's not the same, and it's not what I wanted.
I will say the original Evil Dead movie, the first one, has one of the scariest, creepiest, grossest scenes.
The tree scene?
No, the pencil. There's a scene where a character gets stabbed by one of the Deadites with a pencil. And not only do they stab them in the hand with it, they stab and they twist the pencil around. And, oh, man, like anytime you see something like that in a horror movie, there's another moment in Dawn of the Dead where there's a zombie that comes up behind this woman and bites her shoulder. And it looks like tearing flesh. Like it those two scenes are the two grossest scenes I've ever seen.
You've seen Shaun of the Dead, right?
I have, yes.
So Shaun of the Dead has one of the few scenes in any horror / any kind of movie that actually unsettles me, and I can't really watch it.
Oh, really?
And it's when the tall, jerky guy gets swamped and like mobbed by the zombies, and they just like rip his stomach open and all of his intestines. Like that part, the rest of the movie, I love the entire movie. Yeah. But like I don't like horror in general, and that's the one part of that movie that I'm just like, oh, I can't do it.
Yeah. This looks cool. I don't know if the game is any good, but it's definitely worth playing just to kind of experience hearing Bruce Campbell.
Yeah. No, that's true.
And if the rest of this music is like this track, I'm in.
It is. Yeah. The music is very appropriate to what's going on
awesome.
Throughout the game. So
sweet.
Let's talk about these composers, and then we have another sponsor. But first off, so PCB Productions is a production company. I actually don't have any other information on them.
My thought.
I was just going to say what you were going to say, but go ahead and say it.
Well, I was just going to say that I think all of these composers work under the PCB Productions umbrella.
Right, and that's I agree with you. I think that's probably what the deal is. Christopher Larson started doing sound stuff all the way back in 2000, doing audio on ESPN NBA Tonight on the Dreamcast. And then if I'm looking around here for music composition, we've got original music composition on this, Evil Dead Regeneration, and that appears to be it. He is still active today, with his most recent contribution being Foley supervision, recording, and senior sound supervisor on Crucible in 2020 on Windows. If we move on to Keith and Michael, they do have a lot more music composition credits. So Keith started out doing music and sound effects in Cliffhanger in 1993 on the Genesis. and they are super active and still active today. So just running through and finding a couple things here. A game that I am familiar with and loved as a kid, Rhapsody, a musical adventure in 1998 on the PlayStation.
Oh, wow.
Also credited on the 2022 remake.
Oh, cool.
And he's got recording engineer, recording by, Amphibian Paradise performed by. So he actually did some performance on that game. He did additional music on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 in 2000. Let's come up a bit more. In 2003, Metal Arms Glitch in the System on PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. He did music. Original music on WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 in 2007.
I think both of those games were THQ, so most likely he was working for THQ, or PCB Productions was hired by THQ. That could have been it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did original music in 2011 on Dirty Drivin'. And then, I see here music on Rhapsody, a musical adventure in 2022.
Dirty Drivin', nobody puts baby in the corner.
Exactly. Their most recent, this is to prove you right, their most recent credit here is 2024 Contra Operation Galuga under PCB executive producer.
There you go.
So, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we've got Michael Cohen. Oh, good. This one's a lot shorter. We got Michael Cohen started out doing FMV original music on Defender in 2002 on the GameCube and PlayStation 2. Did additional music in Metal Arms Glitch in the System in 2003, WWE SmackDown vs. Raw in 2008, Golden Axe Beast Rider in 2008 on the Xbox, did original music there, as well as H2 Overdrive in 2009 in the arcade, and also Dirty Drivin' in 2011.
Nice.
And that is their most recent audio credit.
Okay.
So I said we had another sponsor here, as is apropos, S-Mart branded weaponized prosthetics. We know how hard it can be after the loss of a limb during a zombie or ghoul attack. That's why S-Mart is here to make your day a little brighter with S-Mart brand weaponized prosthetics. Choose from chainsaws, motorized machetes, cricket bats, and more. Guaranteed to be groovy. That's the S-Mart way. And remember, shop smart. Shop S-Mart.
Speaking of shopping, it looks like we have a Patreon member, Jordan and Anson Davis. We have two members who are popping over. And hey, guys, what do you want to hear? You want to hear a track?
UMD.
Huh, what was that? Weird. Well, hey, it's great to see you guys.
Betamax.
Who's that voice again?
Mini disc.
Oh geez, I think I'm being haunted by a ghost of Sony proprietary media formats.
Memory stick Pro Duo.
I think it's inspired a song request. Love to hear Ghost in the Pan from the Vita version of Little Big Planet.
I've come for your Blu-ray disc drive.
Thanks, SPGM Radio.
All right. Well, I think that sounds like a good plan. Let's play some Little Big Planet on the PlayStation Vita. This came out in 2012, and this track is called Ghost in the Pan, and it's by Richard Jakes. All right. Thanks to Jordan and Anson Davis for that little pick from Little Big Planet.
A little big pick.
Little Big Pick from A Little Big Planet. That came out on the PlayStation Vita in 2012, and that was Ghost in the Pan by Richard Jakes.
So, I mean, I love me a theremin, and this had a really cool, spooky, scary theremin.
Yeah.
They actually used a really good range of it. I feel like I usually hear theremin mostly in like the upper ranges, and this one, like the theremin was all over the place.
Yeah, I agree.
And I appreciate that they used the full range of that instrument, and then those strings, like the violins and the cellos, really kind of fleshed this out. Like this felt like an orchestral piece, but I really think there was only like 5 or less instruments going on here.
If you throw a theremin into a spooky song, I'm in.
Oh, of course.
It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
So I love this just for that theremin. Everything else sounded pretty on point for a spooky track, but yeah, that theremin always like sells it for me.
100%.
I have not played any of the Little Big Planet games.
Really?
Yeah.
They're cute.
I might have played a demo on the PSP for one of them, I think. But yeah, I haven't really played much of them.
So I think it started on the PS3, if I remember.
Okay.
But I don't think I played any on the PS3. I don't have any memories of that. I think it was one of the free games of the month at one point on PS4.
Okay.
I don't remember which one. It might have been Little Big Planet 3. But I played about a third to half that game, and it was pretty fun. I mean, the only reason that I stopped playing it was because other things that I wanted to play more came out, and I just switched to them.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a platformer.
Yeah.
You're this little guy named Sackboy. Yep. You're running around trying to like fix stuff up. Usually something has gone wrong in the world that you're in, and you're just trying to like patch it all up, and you're collecting stickers and all sorts of things along the way. So it's like a platformer collectathon. But the things about the game is like there are 3 kind of components to the game. There's actually the tagline of the game is play, create, share. So play, you're playing through these platforming worlds or levels as Sackboy. You can create your own Sackboy. You can create your own levels. Like you can create things in the game, and then share. You can share the things that you've created, so your friends can like download the levels and play the levels that you've made and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it was really, really big when it first came out on the whole play the game and then make your own content kind of a thing.
I remember that a bunch of game companies were releasing like DLC for the Sackboy character so that you could like play as different, like you could dress him up as different characters. I remember they had like a Tifa and like a Cloud one for Final Fantasy VII, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one specifically, this isn't just Little Big Planet for the PS Vita. This is actually called Little Big Planet PS Vita. It's the 4th game in the series.
Oh, okay. I thought that was weird because I was reading it. I was like, why does it say PS Vita twice?
It's actually part of the name, I guess.
All right. That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then there was even a Little Big Planet karting. They had their own kind of like Mario Kart type of thing.
Yeah, Sony was really trying to, expand the franchise. Yeah, pretty neat track. Fun. Richard Jakes is a longtime composer, did a lot of work with Sega back in the day. First composer credit was F1 Challenge on the Sega Saturn, doing the Sega Europe music. Sega 3D Blast, he did some music on that. Sonic R, did a lot of stuff around that time. He has done a number of different things with Sony, though, like iToy. He did some music composition for the iToy games, like iToy Play 3. Did Mass Effect, the additional music for that. The Club in 2008. Sonic Generations, again, doing a lot of work with the Sonic franchise. He did the soundtracks for the Sonic Boom games, both Shattered Crystal and Fire and Ice, both on the Nintendo 3DS. His latest game, he actually won an award for, if I remember correctly, for Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy game that came out in 2021, came out on PS5. This was the action game that came out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one. So, okay. So let's move into your next pick.
All right. So next up here, we're going to get a little wet with Dredge. This is a game that came out on the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC, all in 2023. The track is called The Winnowed Town and was composed by David Mason. Welcome back to Spookyfest 2024. That was The Winnowed Town from Dredge, a 2003 game that came out on pretty much all the current stuff.
Everything.
And some of the old stuff. Composer on that was David Mason, and I wanted to kind of bring us into a place that we could maybe ease the tension and relax a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. This felt like a murder mystery kind of track. You know, that's the kind of the vibe that I got from it, especially with those strings.
Yeah.
Those kind of plucky strings.
The harp?
Yeah, the harp. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So one of the reasons that I picked this track is just because the prominent clarinet that's featured as the kind of the main instrument here, and that's one of the instruments that I played in high school. So I was like, oh, hey, I was trying to figure out, you know, when I was originally listening to it, like, is that an oboe, clarinet, a saxophone? Because, I mean, you've got saxophones that look like clarinets. I think it's a soprano sax, but it's definitely not, because you don't have any of that metallic reverb in there.
Right.
So I thought this was just kind of a really chill track in what is a not really chill game. So have you played Dredge? Do you know anything about it?
I know nothing about this, no.
So I believe I've watched our friend Kevin play this game.
Okay.
Either that or there's another game that's somewhat similar to Dredge that involves being in a boat. But this is a fishing horror role-playing adventure game.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. So you are a fisherman. Throughout the game, you have a small, like, motorized fishing boat, and you are just out here fishing and trying to stay alive. You catch your fish, you sell your fish, you make money, you buy what you need. You can buy upgrades for your boat, like, you know, better lights, faster motors and stuff like that. And you can also salvage things. So sometimes you won't catch fish, but you'll pull up all sorts of things from the seafloor, dredging, as they call it. But you are in this coastal town called Greater Marrow, and you just notice, like, at night when the sun goes down, things get kind of weird and you don't know if you're just seeing things, if you're hallucinating, or if things are really happening. At one point, there's a character that dredges up a casket from the seafloor, which is, of course, nobody can pull up something that looks ominous and then just leave it alone. They got to open it. And in opening it, releases a supernatural fog that then covers the archipelago that this game takes place in. Mm-hmm. So that just kind of makes all of the weird horror stuff even more frightening, because now you've got this fog that you can't see through, and a gigantic sea monster called the Leviathan starts destroying boats, and you catch a glimpse of it here and there, but again, you're just not sure if you're hallucinating or if this is really happening until the Leviathan sets its sights on you and starts harassing you. And so you are trying to, again, stay alive, catch what you need to catch to make money and to survive, and then also trying to avoid this almost Lovecraftian monster that is hell-bent on just destroying everything. And so the game takes place with day and night cycles, and you can stay out all day and all night, but the thing is, the later that you stay out into the night, and if you don't have good lights and whatnot, then you really can't tell what's real and what's a hallucination, because sometimes things are real and sometimes things aren't real. And the game does not make that clear to you to add to that horror factor. So it's pretty wild. I haven't watched the game in its entirety, but again, I'm 99% certain this is the game that I watched Kevin play a handful of times. He was streaming on Twitch, and it's really cool, and it's fun to watch. I wouldn't want to play it because I don't think I'd be able to keep my cool.
Right. Yeah. What's up with all the tracks that we're picking with water themed stuff?
Well, I did say we're surviving this weather. It is out here raining on the whole festival.
That's it.
And
we're about to get in our boats.
Yeah, pretty soon it's going to flood, and we're going to have to avoid the monsters that come up from the depths.
That's it. So tell me about David Mason.
David Mason started with this game actually in 2023 as the audio lead and the composer. He then did the music for the expansion DLC called Dredge the Pale Reach, which came out later, again in 2023. He has done sound design and music in Life Eater that came out this year in 2024. And then his most recent thing was also this year called I Am Your Beast. He was the sound effects designer.
Okay.
All of those actually sound like horror games to me, just based on the name alone.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah.
So maybe he just likes doing scary music for scary games.
Yeah. Possibly.
All right, let's get on to your next pick.
Yeah, so this track that I'm going to be playing is called Battle with Huster, and it's from the Sharp X68000 version of a game called La Place No Ma. This came out in 1990, and the composer was Akiko Kosaka. All right, you are back. And that track that we just played was called Battle with Huster, not Hustler, as Justin and I both discussed during the break. We're like, did you misread it as Battle with Hustler? Yeah, I misread it too. Get your mind out of the gutter, Justin. Le Place No Ma was the name of the game, and it came out on a bunch of different stuff, but this is specifically the Sharp X68000 port that came out in 1990. The original version of the game came out in 1987, I believe, on the PC 98 as well as the PC 88. They got an MSX port 2 years later, and then this version came out, which has like improved graphics, backgrounds, and the monsters and everything. The character portraits are improved, and there was also like different music and mouse support added as well.
Nice.
So that way it feels like a much more like what it is, which is a point and click experience. But yeah, this was composed by Akiko Kosaka, the 1990 release from the Sharp X68000. I love this. It's super upbeat, which is different than most of the stuff that we played tonight. Most of the stuff has been like very like somber, a little bit creepier,
a little atmospheric at times.
Yeah, aside from like a few tracks. But yeah, this track in particular, really very good bouncy Castlevania kind of vibes.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I really enjoyed this one. I mean, for one, it definitely sounds like a battle track. Like it's called Battle with Huster.
Yeah.
So it should be, but it definitely feels like a tense and upbeat battle track. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't a lot, but there was a little bit of stereo play. There was a little bit.
I was going to say
between.
we've had a number of tracks that have been doing some really cool panning stuff this episode, and this is again one of the tracks that had some cool panning effects. If you're listening on like mono speakers or whatever, like, grab some headphones and listen, because it's really cool.
Yeah, we've mentioned it every time, but
Yeah.
a lot of these tracks have done stereo stuff. And then, of course, I can't not mention that fat bass.
Yes, fat bass.
It's just like right out the gate, slapping that bass like it did something wrong.
Yeah, really sounded like something from the Silent Mobius game that came out on the X68000.
Okay.
There's a track in there that has a really funky bass line too, so yeah, very similar. This game is pretty wacky. It's based in a town called Newcam, Massachusetts, that takes place back in 1924. And essentially what happens is the previous owner of the mansion was known as Benedict Weathertop. And while practicing black magic, he ends up killing his parents. And since then, like, nobody goes in this mansion until two boys were found dead near the mansion. I guess they tried to go in. There's also a girl that potentially followed, but they can't find the girl. So you, as the hero, kind of put together a team of 4 people, and they could be either dilettantes, which they don't have any abilities, detectives that are melee fighters that use guns, mediums like magic users, scientists which can use machines, and journalists which can take pictures and stuff of the monsters that can be sold to a newspaper. So it has a lot of really unique like RPG kind of elements in that sense, where you got to kind of pick and choose which jobs, like Final Fantasy V.
Yeah, job classes.
Yeah, job classes. You can go to the shop in Newcam to buy weapons or items. So very much like, again, like an RPG. Once you like get everybody together, then you got to go to the mansion, and it's all in Japanese, but it's a first-person dungeon crawler style game. So you're trying to examine all the like closets and all the bookshelves and stuff like that, trying to find different notes and whatnot, trying to solve the mystery of what happened. But then there's also all these monsters that are like hidden throughout the mansion that you got to take on. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, the Sharp X68000 port is one of the better ports of this game. It did get a Windows port like not that long ago, like in 2016, but I don't know anything about it. The original was developed by Hummingbird Soft.
Okay. And
they made games up till 1995. So obviously it didn't do the port for this. So it was most likely, the rights were bought by another company, and then they, that, or like the original creators of the game made a new company and took the ownership of the game. So it's also called Diable de la Place in certain regions too. So yeah, pretty wacky. The composer Akiko Kosaka doesn't have any credits other than the Super Nintendo version of this game, Le Place No Ma, in addition to art and graphics on the karate tournament in 1992 for the arcade. They're credited as the back assistant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so really not much that I can say, but they were the only credit that I could find for this game, and I didn't even find them listed as the Sharp X68000 composer credits. So there's a possibility that the composer is unknown if these tracks are not the same, or if there's like an arranger involved. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but I thought that overall the story and everything was pretty creepy in this game. So yeah. What do you got coming up next?
All right. So this is a game that I've had a few people tell me that they want me to play, and I got to look into it. But it's called Remnant 2. This came out on PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC last year in 2003. And the track is going to be called Feast for the Ravenous. It was composed by Rob Westwood and Oscar Senen. All right, you're back, and that was Remnant 2 on the Xbox Series consoles, PS5, PC, came out last year in 2023. Feast for the Ravenous was the name of the track, composed by Rob Westwood and Oscar Senen.
Kind of reminded me of something from like a Soul Calibur game.
You took the words out of my mouth. Literally, it's very, very bombastic, very in your face. So it feels a little bit more intense than some of the Soul Calibur stuff, and that's likely what they're going for anyway, because this game is...
there's more tension in the track than in most Soul Calibur tracks.
Exactly, and I feel like there's more going on, whereas the Soul Calibur tracks are there to be background music to a fight. Yeah. This is like adding atmosphere to what's going on.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I had a few friends that had reached out to me and said, "Oh, hey, you should grab this and play with us," because so a lot of the people that I played Destiny 2 with, we all kind of stopped playing Destiny 2 for one reason or another. I have my reasons. Some of my friends just kind of haven't had time for it and haven't gotten back into it. Either way, this game is what they were trying to get me into, saying that it was, it's kind of like Destiny, and it's not. It's not really a looter shooter.
Do you play with friends?
You do. So the reason that they're saying that it's similar to Destiny is it's multiplayer up to 3 people. So Destiny, your fire teams were teams of 3 unless you were in a raid, in which case it's 6. But similar thing where your teams of 3, and it looks like there's 3 classes you can play as. Aside from that, like it's not a first-person shooter. It is a third-person shooter, action role-playing game, and it's also, from what I'm seeing, a lot of people call it a Souls-like, which is the one thing that I'm like, I don't really do Souls-likes. I don't want to bang my head against a wall.
Oh, you like having fun in video games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But other than Elden Ring, the Souls games and a lot of the Souls-likes aren't really multiplayer. And that's one of the things that makes them difficult is it's a lot of rolling around on the ground and just, whittling away at an enemy until it finally dies. Whereas this, I don't know if there's any rolling around on the ground because there's guns. Like you have 2 guns and a melee weapon. I watched some gameplay when my friends was playing it. It seems pretty cool. Like it almost feels like if you want want to compare it to Destiny 2, it almost feels like that, but in a weird, like, medieval fantasy setting. Although I don't know how medieval it really is, because again, you've got guns and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But it has that Souls game setting feeling where everything is kind of like dark and decaying and stuff like that. So it looks fairly interesting. I've avoided kind of getting too much into the lore and whatnot, because I think I am going to actually get this, and I don't want to go into it with like, oh, I already know everything.
Yeah,
like, I want to experience. If I'm going to play it, I want to actually experience it.
If there's a bit of a story in it, it's probably something that's best experienced alone. I can't play story-based games that are multiplayer with other people. It never works, because other people always want to skip the cutscenes.
Well, that's the thing. I can, as long as we're all on the same wavelength. Either we're all playing it for the first time and we're going to go through all this stuff, or we've all done the stuff single player and we're trying to get through it as a team so we can play the end game stuff.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. But it looks pretty nifty. And if anybody out there does play this and has any thoughts on it, especially in comparison to everything that I just said, some of which is probably incorrect, feel free to correct me on our Discord or reach out, even if you're like, oh, hey, we should play this together. Because that's part of the reason that I play video games these days, is to play with people. And there's only a few games that I play single player at this point, and it's really just because I have nothing better to do, so I'm going to play the single player game.
For the most part, I like couch co-op.
Yeah.
Or couch multiplayer. It's just very difficult to do.
Yeah. I much prefer cooperative play to competitive play. I also don't mind a blend. Like it's cooperative, you're all going towards the same goal, but like you're competing for score or kills or something.
Right.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I dig the music in this game. The soundtrack is very bombastic. Like if you liked this, you'll probably like the rest of the music on this game, because it sounds very similar. And the little bit that I've seen and the little bit that I've read, without trying to spoil much of it for myself, looks pretty fun. So we'll have to report back at some point. These composers, though, Rob Westwood started out doing music in Rooms, the main building, in 2008 on Windows and Mac, and has been somewhat busy since 2008. We've got a bunch of Lego movie games. Did the music for Lego Marvel Superheroes, Lego The Hobbit, Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham, Lego Jurassic World, Lego Marvel Avengers. And then we have music in Solstice in 2016 on Windows. And then, so Remnant 2 is definitely a sequel. The first game was called Remnant from the Ashes, came out in 2019 for the PlayStation 4. And then the most recent game they have here is Remnant 2 in 2023. So they've been fairly busy with a lot of Lego stuff, it looks like. And then we've got Oscar Senen. They started out doing orchestration on Assassin's Creed Unity Dead Kings in 2015. And they went on to do additional music and tuba in Remnant from the Ashes. They conducted the orchestra for Asgard's Wrath in 2019, and then they are here on Remnant 2, again on tuba, and with additional music compositions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, last game.
For me.
Track.
For me.
You.
For me.
Yes. I was talking slowly, but it was all in there. I was going to get it out. Got to give me time.
Okay, Shatner.
Getting slow in my old age.
This game that we're about to play is Deep Fear. This came out in the Saturn in 1998, and Destruction is the name of the track by Kenji Kawai. Welcome back. That was Deep Fear that came out on the Sega Saturn in 1998. That track was called Destruction, and it's by Kenji Kawai. You may be wondering to yourself, I've never heard of this game before. I never heard of this coming out in North America, and that's because it didn't. It only came out in the UK, PAL territories, and Japan.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
That's why we'd never heard of it. Well, this track was 3 Spoopy 5 Me.
Yeah, it was a lot of change. Throughout the track.
There were a lot of things that I really liked about it, and a lot of things that I thought were kind of interesting. It started out where it was like, okay, this is pretty electronic, and then like the electronic elements kind of moved more to the background, and then they became more electronic, and like so it was like ebbing and flowing with this electronic sound that went throughout it, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
It had those bongos in there, and I wrote down the bongos ... of doom. So I enjoyed those bongos.
The survival horror bongos.
Yeah, they were a little bit silly, but like they didn't really take me out of it. As just like I noticed the bongos and was like, what's with those bongos, man?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm being chased by a hippie.
I know, right?
Everything else, like I'm sure plenty of the stuff was either MIDI or electronic in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, a lot of it was. You could tell the samples.
Well, and that's the thing. Like the only thing that really stood out to me as MIDI were the horns.
Oh yeah.
Everything else sounded relatively.
Womp, womp, womp. Yeah.
And those stabs, those like you're saying, those stabs were really cool too, because it was just like a number of instruments like all at once.
I think most of the stuff I heard in the beginning especially was not really monumental, but I think when the track really got my attention was you hear that like water explosion where it goes sploosh, and then you hear the da-na-na-na-na-na-na, like those kind of moments.
Yeah.
That really kind of made me perk up during the track and be like, oh, okay, this is kind of neat. So, Deep Fear is a Saturn exclusive. It was developed by System Sakam. They now make, I guess, Japanese electronic devices, but they were making video games in like the 80s and 90s. So this was published exclusively for the Saturn. It's a science fiction take on the whole mansion mystery kind of style.
Oh.
Games like what we talked about before, La Place Nomad. Similar to that, where it's like there's a mansion and, it's a mystery. And
Maniac Mansion?
It's a Maniac Mansion, that's right. There's this underwater research base called Big Table. And essentially what you're doing is you're playing as a character whose name is John Mayer, not the John Mayer, but his name is John Mayer, spelled Mayor.
He's the mayor of Johntown.
That's it, yeah. And so he is kind of like more training in terms of his role here on the Big Table research base. But what happened was there was a space capsule that was lost for about 40 years, and it ends up crashing back into the ocean. So a U.S. Navy sub picks it up, brings it over to the Big Table, and so he's been basically doing like safety drills. He actually has a cold while he's doing all this, which is kind of interesting. Like, does that mean that the whole game he's just like talking like this, like I have a cold? You know, what ends up happening is it's kind of like Alien, where like there's an infection that starts spreading on the ship, and so it's turning people who are both alive and dead into these like terrible creatures.
Oh,
yeah. And funny enough, the cold that John Mayer has makes it so he can't get infected.
Only room for one virus in that body.
Apparently, yeah. It's like a super COVID. Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah. Kenji Kawai is the composer on this one, and they've got a bunch of credits, starting off with Bloody Warriors Shango no Gyakushu, and that was a NES game that came out in 1990. They worked on some of the Ren Mahaf games, starting with the TurboGrafx CD one, as well as the sequel that also came out on the TurboGrafx CD a year later. They did Sorcerian on the TurboGrafx CD. Then they worked on games for the Saturn, primarily with stuff like Blue Seed, Metal Fighter Miku, this game, and that's when they jumped into arcade work with Battle Trist. They worked on Folklore in 2007. Then they did Gundam Versus, which is their latest game, came out in 2017. And they're credited for both the Fight and Unknown music. So there you have it. Before we get to Justin's final pick, we have a sponsor, John Mayer's new album, Big Table Blues. The new John Mayer record is finally out at all Coconuts, Sam Goody, Suncoast, Strawberries, and Record Town stores. But it's not that John Mayer. No, this John's last name is spelt Mayor. And yes, it's recorded by the main character of the Sega Saturn classic Deep Fear. Who knew he was such a crooner? This latest record is called Big Table Blues and is a personal account of his time at the big table. This one's sure to go platinum, so grab it today for $13.99.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Can't wait to give that a listen.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so it looks like it's time for me to wrap this up. So we're going to go with something that is relatively recent. Alone in the Dark, the, I think, 7th installment in the series.
Yeah, the most recent one.
Yeah, just came out this year, 2024, for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. And we're going to listen to Alone in the Dark credits, and it was composed by Jason Conan. All right, that is the end of our Spookyfest 2024 show. And that was Alone in the Dark, the newest entry in that series from 2024 on the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Alone in the Dark Credits was the title of that track, and it was composed by Jason Conan. I actually don't know who the vocalist was.
It's funny because when we started it up, I was like, what? Did you say something? And you were like, no. What? We were both very confused.
I knew there was lyrics in it, but I forgot what the quality of the voice was. So when it came on, it surprised me. And then, of course, Mike didn't know at all. So he thought it was me.
I was like, wait, what?
But yeah, very short track. I thought, it's a neat track to end that game with. And it felt like a neat track to kind of end this festival with.
Yeah. I haven't played any of the Alone in the Dark games.
Neither have I.
Yeah. But the voice is super creepy in these credits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really the main thing that I focused on. The music in it itself is also fairly creepy. So I'm wondering, like, is the ending of the game one of those, like, not so great endings where you really can't avoid bad things happening, or is it just, continuing the creep factor of what's been going on throughout the game?
And it ends up being every introvert's nightmare. Not only are you no longer alone in the dark, but now you're at a party filled with people and it's very bright out. Oh my God, get me out of here.
And the music is too loud, nobody can hear you.
Right. Yeah.
At the rave, no one can hear you scream. So I don't have a whole lot to talk about as far as the track goes. I just thought it was a really neat track, and I like how creepy it sounded and thought it was really appropriate for this show.
So that leads me to two questions. One, have you played this Alone in the Dark game? And two, have you played any Alone in the Dark games?
No.
Okay.
No,
so you've never been alone in the dark?
No, I have been alone in the dark. I've just never played Alone in the Dark.
This and Sweet Home are kind of the granddaddies of survival horror.
Yeah. And this game, so the 2024 game is apparently a reimagining of the original 1992 game.
Oh, cool.
So it features single-player narrative. It's set in the 1930s, and you can choose to play as one of two characters, Edward Carnby, who is voiced by David Harbour of Stranger Things fame, or Emily Hartwood, who is voiced by Jodie Comer.
Okay. I've heard that name before.
So have I. Yeah, so interesting cast overall. It is, I believe, an eldritch horror type of a game. So it's just, things going on that are kind of beyond comprehension, a lot of madness inducing stuff. So, you're following Emily and Edward, who is a private investigator, as they travel to the Derceto Manor, which is a home for the mentally fatigued, 1930s speak for crazy, to investigate the disappearance of Jeremy Hartwood, who is voiced by Paul Mercier and is Emily's uncle. So they stumble upon eldritch horrors involving hideous monsters, mental environments, cult conspiracies, and connections involving a mysterious being known as the Dark Man. Again,
wonder if Liam Neeson's involved. Speaking of Sam Raimi.
Yes, there you go. But yeah, the game itself has gotten okay reviews. It doesn't look like it's gotten terrible reviews from most places anyway, but it looks to be fairly middle of the road to positive. I haven't heard anything bad about it.
Pretty wild how many times Alone in the Dark has been revisited.
That's exactly what I was just going to say, because they're saying that it's the 7th installment in the series, but that doesn't mean like it's the 6th sequel or anything, because Alone in the Dark, like the original game, has been reimagined or redone a number of times. I feel like it was just done like within the last 10 years.
Yeah, it came out on the PS3, if I recall.
Yeah, and the Xbox, I think.
Yeah, and then the Dreamcast had a reimagining, I believe, too, or maybe a sequel, I can't remember. And then there was a port that went to the Game Boy Color, too. So, like, it's been re-released and reimagined countless times.
Yeah,
Pretty
wow.
Cool.
I'm seeing here just all the consoles that the games have been on. MS-DOS, PC-98, FM Towns, 3DO, Classic Mac OS, iOS, Sega Saturn, PlayStation, Windows, Game Boy Color, Dreamcast, PS2, Wii, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 5, and the Xbox Series X and S.
All the game consoles.
I mean, almost. Like, let's do a downport to the NES, guys. Let's get that going.
Yes, let's make it happen. Tell me about Jason Conan.
Yeah, so Jason Conan only has this one credit.
Oh.
He is apparently new to the scene, but yeah, he's the composer on Alone in the Dark 2024, and that is it.
Okay, well, that leaves us with plenty of time to finish up with our fourth and final ad.
Oh, yes, so we have one more sponsor here. Are you all alone and can't find your way to the bedroom? Need a helping hand? Well, how about the Alone in the Dark fleshlight? It'll light up your night and help you see everything you've been missing over the years. Hate that journey through the dark to the place where the magic happens? Or maybe you want a late night adventure to the bathroom while the wife is in bed? This will help you get there and more. Wait. I think this is a misspelling.
Yeah.
Janine, did you mean to put flashlight? She did. She had to, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. Well, take that for what it is.
So the Alone in the Dark
flashlight.
Yes. Flashlight, Janine. Typos.
That makes way more sense.
Yeah, those are two totally different things. Although they're shaped similar, from what I understand.
All right.
Anywho,
that does bring us to the time in the show where we ask ourselves, why are we here? No, I mean, what is your favorite track that we've played?
Ooh, this is tough. We picked some good stuff this time around. I am going to pick your Evil Dead track.
Yeah. That one was very interesting.
That was just, man, so unsettling. For this time of the year, I think I'm going to go with that one.
That's fair. Yeah. I am kind of torn between your Deep Fear Destruction track and my Splatterhouse 3 David in Peril track.
Yeah.
Those were both totally different tracks, very different reasons behind why I like them. But I think I'm going to go with that Destruction track. It was different, and I liked what they did with it.
Yeah, cool.
What about you, the listeners? What did you like? What was your favorite tracks? Let us know on all the things.
So we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons, without whom this show's continued improvement would be impossible. They are Cam Worma, Jordan and Anson Davis, Rage Cage, Kung Fu Carlito of the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, Claire Myers, Brad Austin, Chris Murray, Llama Adam, Marcus Stewart, Red Hua, Nick Davis, Ryan McPherson, and Chris Murray.
If you would like to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/XVGMradio. There you can see the different tiers as well. Just $1 gets you a thank you at the end of the show and access to our monthly live shows.
You can visit our website, xvgmradio.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and learn more about your hosts, as well as any of our guests or composers that we've had on the show.
If you'd like to reach out to us, you can always email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com.
If you've liked what you've heard, please consider giving us a review on iTunes.
You can join our Facebook group and chat with other VGM lovers at facebook.com/groups/xvgmradio, where we talk about everything from current game news to sharing awesome VGM tracks or just talking about the podcast itself.
You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle on both of those sites is @XVGMradio.
If you don't have any other social media or just want to try something unique, check us out on our Discord group chat. Links will be in the show notes.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of XVGM Radio's Spookyfest 2024. But don't worry, because we also just released a Spookyfest Backstage Pass episode for our live show. So if you're a Patreon member, you can go check out 7 additional bonus tracks that are of the spooky variety. So go check that out. And of course, if you're a patron, you get access to all the previous live shows and all the previous Spookyfest backstage passes. So go check that out. Again, only $1 to access all of that.
Yeah. And then what else we got coming up?
So we're doing an After Dark next month.
Yep.
In November, and we're going to be doing Justin's pick.
So yeah, in November, on November 12th, we are going to be listening to Conker's Bad Fur Day on vinyl. Come join us over at twitch.tv/shock83j16, and let's all have a Bad Fur Day.
Yeah, and anybody can access those. You don't have to be a Patreon member to access those. So,
yeah, we post about it on Twitter, I think on Facebook,
Discord,
and we posted in the Twitter. There should be an event in the Discord that you can follow, and that will also let you know when we're starting. So give that a look-see.
Oh, yeah. And then our episode 117, is going to be coming out next month, and we're going to be covering games. This is kind of like an addendum to our Natsume musical history episode that we did a 3-part episodic history on the musical history of Natsume. The first episode of that, the first part was episode 99. Then we did episode 102, which was the musical history of Natsume part 2. And then we did musical history of Natsume part 3, which came out episode 105. So now we're jumping ahead to cover the Tengo project developer. That is a bunch of ex-Natsume developers that are re-releasing and remaking some of their games, like Ninja Warriors, also now called Ninja Saviors, games like Wild Guns, and their most recent release, which is a remake, a full-on remake of Shadow of the Ninja. So really cool stuff. We're going to listen to amazing tracks by them as a kind of addendum to those Natsume musical history episodes. So you're going to not want to miss this.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is Mike
and Justin
signing off for XVGM Radio.